While Aggro Shaman took the cake for the strongest deck in the Mean Streets meta, mid-range Jade Shaman might very well steal the show in the final month leading up to the standard rotation. The deck has shown consistent growth in popularity and strength over the last 4 weeks, and with the nerfs to Buccaneer and Claws, which are most damaging to Aggro Shaman, we may be due for mid-range Shaman's finest days here in the coming weeks. On the whole, piloting mid-range Shaman is fairly straightforward. Look for good openers like Trog, Golem, and Claws in the opening mulligan. Use weapons and a few select spells for valuable removal, and use your smaller minions to trade up and make room for bigger and bigger ones. The deck inevitably snowballs to an overwhelming board, or finds its lethal by way of some smaller burst options. What's distinct about mid-range Shaman relative to former iterations of mid-range Shaman is that it's usually just fine to trade your minions away. You don't need totems on board to buff with a Thunderbluff Valiant, and you don't need to save that precious lightning bolt for high value removal and burn. Almost every turn you develop as you remove, and ultimately, one problem players can run into is not having traded away certain minions and finding a lack of space on the board for multiple minion summons like Jade Spirit and Jade Chieftain. While the deck is fairly proactive, using more or less the same strategy in all matchups, and while the deck has at least a 50-50 chance or better against almost all of the strong decks in the meta, there's a few things to keep in mind versus different types of decks. Versus Reno Warlock and Reno Mage, the Jade Shaman is strongly favored. Look hard in the mulligan for Trog and Golem, as early pressure is important to keep the Reno decks on their heels. Versus Reno Warlock, keeping a Hex in the mulligan can be good, because a turn 3 or turn 4 biggie like Mountain Giant or Twilight Drake can change the pace of the game against your favor. Versus Reno Mage, hanging onto your Jinyu can be a smart idea, since one of the narrow scenarios that the Mage can win is with an Alexstrasza with Burst to follow. Jinyu puts your post-Alex health total decently out of range of one turn Mage burn. Perhaps the biggest thing to realize against Reno decks is that you don't need to apply overwhelming pressure to win. Keeping just 2 or 3 strong minions on the board is all you need, and if you overdevelop without having a strong follow-up play from your hand the next turn, you can get punished by really big AoE and Kazakus potions. Versus aggro decks, the most important thing is having tools to deal with the turn 1 and turn 2 minions. Maelstrom Portal, Jade Claws, and Tunnel Trog are the ideal things to find here. Also realize the value of taunt in these matchups. Getting your Jade Chieftains and things from below down at the right moment is essential. If the aggro opponent has to use tools from hand to get through these taunts, then things are looking very strong for the Shaman. And getting what's called the Taunt Lock is especially effective versus aggro warrior, summoning enough totems onto the board that later in the game you can be guaranteed a taunt totem each time. This can sometimes completely close out a game. The Dragon Priest matchup is extremely favored if you can deal with their 1-drop, 2-drop, and 3-drop plays, and it can be extremely difficult to win if you do not. Mulligan hard for lines of play that can handle things like Northshire Cleric, Twilight Whelp, and Wormwrist Agent. If these minions do stick and then get buffed by Talon Priest and Power Word Shield, they might demand a Hex for removing, which will later be missed when the Secret Agent comes through. Versus Rogue, the biggest thing to remember is the power of Devolve, Jade Lightning, and Hex. Whether it's the Aggro or Miracle Rogue variant, Devolve can deal with the board of buffed, sticky minions that Rogue is seeking to develop. Hex can deal with the Fat Edwin and questing, and Jade Lightning is ridiculously tempo efficient against Drake and Pillager. The Jade Druid matchup plays out like most Druid matchups do. If you go wide on the board and get ahead with high health minions, Druid simply can't deal with them and you win. Make sure you don't get stranded in a spot where you can't deal with a Gadgetzan Auctioneer or Fandral, and from there the matchup is fairly draw dependent but still in the Shaman's favor simply because the deck is consistently faster. Finally, the mirror match. Key here is realizing whether you are inevitably ahead or inevitably behind. If you're ahead, be sure not to overextend, and don't leave a scenario on the board where your opponent can completely clear and develop. If you're behind, this is exactly what you're looking for. A decisive moment where a powerful sweep of AoE or a snowball set of Jades and Think from below catapult you in the front. And you shouldn't overdevelop unless you're finding yourself in that particular situation. Lastly, make sure you can always deal with a Mana Tide totem. A single harmless Mana Tide can completely steal the mirror match away. In the post-nerf landscape, many players are still experimenting with various spots in the list. Whether or not you run 1 or 2 copies of Devolve, Flame Tongue, Lightning Storm, and Mana Tide Totem is always a flexible decision. And whether you include Spirit Claws, Bloodlust, and Brand Bronzebeard is also an important decision. But on the whole, the archetype isn't so fit to tech against other classes, because any tech card is going to weaken the Shaman's own game plan. And it just so happens that the Shaman's own game plan is extremely strong and ridiculously consistent. We hope you enjoyed this survey of what looks to be one of the most powerful archetypes in the coming weeks. To see more about the various tech choices and explanations, be sure to check out Spark's written guide on this topic in goodgaming.com's written article section. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and join the discussion in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on all of Good Gaming's Hearthstone guides and videos.